All right, everybody. Thank you for signing up for this interesting presentation tonight on an experience through Hurricane Ida. I'm going to pass this to Phyllis Peoples, who will introduce herself and her two panelists.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'm Phyllis Peoples. I'm the president and CEO of Terrebonne General Medical Center. I have with me two wonderful esteemed colleagues that we've worked with a long time that was very integral as a part of IDA. I'll let them introduce themselves too. I'll let Dr. Lorio start just to say your background and your introduction.
Sure. My name is Andrea Lorio. I'm a pulmonary critical care physician. I've been here at Terrebonne for 5 years and helped to build and develop our intensivist program, as well as growing our pulmonary clinic services and procedural services here at the hospital.
Great.
Hey, I'm Dr. Nathan Sutton. I have been here for 4 years. I'm a hospitalist here at Terrebonne General, and I helped to build the hospital medicine program at Terrebonne 2 years ago.
He's being a bit humble. He's our chief of hospital medicine and our chief of pulmonology, and we rely on them a lot. One of the things that people wanted to talk a little bit about was Hurricane Ida. For many of you who may or may not be aware, as Hurricane Ida hit us with a considerable force, August 29th. Kind of giving you a little historical background is that we anticipated it came up relatively quick. We're in the very southern region of Louisiana, in Houma, Louisiana, and we're used to hurricanes. I've been in my role for now 18 years. I've been at the organization 25 years. So hurricanes aren't something that are foreign to us, but we always prepare. The thing that was different for this particular hurricane is it had a lot of wind and a lot of anticipated force in a short period of time. Whenever you get into some kind of event such as that, we take a lot of time to prepare. Even though we've done it so much, we are able to get our act together and get our organization together relatively quickly. We've got wonderful directors that we've had in place for many, many years, great medical staff, and our staff. Our first initiatives, like any organization, is to try and discharge as many patients as possible. That's where Dr. Sutton and Dr. Lorio came in as our intensivists and our hospitalists, is go through the organization to see who was safe to discharge so that they could evacuate, because we did have a mandatory evacuation starting on Friday with the hurricane hitting, I believe it was a Sunday. So we tried to get as many patients out. We came in on Saturday anticipating how we would prepare and hunker down. And the best thing I could do, if y'all could be patient with us just a little bit, is what we did as a leader. You're always trying to help move your staff to assure that they feel safe, and your patients that they understand you've got the right skill set and the right people here to protect them. One of the things that we were doing is to have some videos of things that were happening. People were taking pictures, and so we put a lot of our journey into a video format, and I'll kind of explain at the conclusion of the video how we got to that. It wasn't intended on the front end of this. It just evolved over our journey to be repaired. And I think it'll put you in our shoes for that night and 4 weeks or 30 days progressing through this. When we first came out of Hurricane Ida, we had a considerable amount of damage. We anticipated it would take us over 6 months to be able to get up and running with the amount of damage that we ensued with the roof and other things. We gave a challenge to my team that 30 days or less, we would be up and running to provide care to our community. When Ida hit, it knocked out all the hospitals in the area. So we're the largest facility between here and New Orleans to provide care. And we knocked out, I think it was 7 hospitals in the area: St. Charles, Lady of the Sea, Chabert, Terrebonne, Tash, so maybe it was around 5 or 6, where nobody could get care. So it was very contingent on us to go ahead and get up and running as fast as possible. So we'll talk a little bit about the videos. If you can bear with us, if you will allow us, we'll show you some of our journey. And then we can have questions and conversation.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, we'll get that running.
It sounded like a freight train just circling the building for about 4 hours.
All of a sudden, the windows all started blowing in the patient rooms.
It was intense.
You could see the fear on the patients' faces, certainly. When we did go to generator power and we lost AC, we lost water pressure, that's when things definitely got more real.
Our roof pretty much exploded, for lack of a better description. To admit that we just can't continue to serve our community and patients was difficult. To evacuate 120 patients is a monumental feat. We were able to get Ochsner, Acadian ambulance people, and they stood in line and they were trying to transfer our patients. It took a full 24 hours of nonstop transfer. You got to find beds. And I got a majority of COVID patients, so you got to find facilities who are able to take these COVID patients. Dr. Nathan Sutton and Dr. Andrea Lorio were with us the whole time.
I just wanted to be here so bad. I didn't want anybody else to do it. So it wasn't even a question for me.
The event happened Sunday. We decided to evacuate on Monday. It took us till Tuesday, and by Wednesday, we still trying to figure out how can we offer services. And by Thursday, we were setting up ER services outside and tents. By Friday, we were operational. It's a marvel to watch, but that's where our commitment comes in, is that we are going to take care of our community. Now we're trying to get services up as quickly as possible as far as what we can. Right after the storm, we initiated several things to help our staff. We definitely wanted to make sure they had enough gas to keep their generators and their life going. I gave my team about a 30-day window to see how much we could get done in that 30 days. We haven't gone home. We're pushing that envelope. Everything is about the patient and the safety of the patient and the safety of our staff to be able to get people in, and we're going to protect that in everything we do. We quickly recognized that oncology was a major deficit for the community, of course, but more so as our patients. They needed their treatment. We've been able to stand up our COVID drive-through vaccines and our monoclonal antibody unit so that people could get treatment. But none of these services can be provided without us having some kind of ancillary support, which is our lab and our radiology. You know, we went down to Chauvin because we have a clinic already set up in Chauvin with Dr. Abu, and now we're able to provide pediatrics and endocrinology and several things. But we have people who want to donate food, so we sent it to Chauvin. Going there to feed just 500 people, it was 800. We brought up all of our medical atrium building, which is all of our clinics. We're real excited about that, which is our pulmonary, which is our endocrinology, neurology, internal medicine, our pediatric clinic across the street. We do have all of our trainers helping out our community schools where they're getting back to sports and different things for our kids, along with our gym that's opening in community sports. We're trying to bring our employees back. The governor came in, called to say, can you meet? From his level to all of his adjunct people around him have been amazing. You know, people forget we have babies that were coming. You know, they don't wait. So we really were moved to try and get a lot of that open. And I have to say, in a 30-day period, which was my commitment to myself and my employees, we got up. Terrebonne General is not about the bricks and mortar. It's about the people in it. That kind of gives you a general feel for what we look like at the beginning. And that was over I guess a 30-day span. The night of the hurricane, as you saw the pictures, I think we ended up doing, I'll tell you what we did, is we started planning from the time the hurricane hit, the day after when we evacuated people, and we talked about that, to start planning how we could get up and running and provide a service. And with Dr. Lorio and Dr. Sutton and several team members, we were putting up ER services. And we started mapping it out by meeting at least, gosh, it was almost 5 days a week.
5 days a week at the beginning
And weekends.
Mhm.
We were going to get up and running. Now, what the videos didn't show, because we melted them together, is I was meeting with all of our team here, executive team and our medical leaders. And then we had our directors that we'd also meet with subsequently to download what we expected. They told me later they thought 30 days was a very ambitious goal, and that was never going to happen. So as we brought things up, we'd end up doing a video, and every Tuesday I would show them the progress. And that's how we ended up getting the videos, is every Tuesday you get a new video to show all the things that we accomplished. And so we asked them, it got a little lengthy to melt them together, but it would be an inspiring moment. And people waited for those Tuesdays to see all the things that we were able to accomplish. I'll let Dr. Lorio and Sutton talk about the night of the hurricane. And if you've got any questions, please interject, but I'll let them kind of talk about their roles.
So my role, coming into the hurricane, I was invited to help and participate in some of the pre-planning meetings for the storm itself. And one of, my roles as the intensivist is to look at all of your critical care patients and see what their needs were, medically, from a medication standpoint, from a nursing and respiratory care standpoint, but also from, a oxygen or ventilator standpoint. At the time the storm hit, we had both our 20-bed unit full of COVID patients, as well as our overflow unit of 10 beds, nearly full with medically fragile ICU patients. So one of the things that we had discussed in the pre-planning meetings, our ICU is on the first floor. One of the biggest concerns with a storm coming in is going to be that storm surge. And if we start taking on water on the first floor, where are we putting our patients and how are we transporting them? So one of the things that I sat down with the nursing director of critical care was to look at all those patients and start making a priority list for who and how we move patients to our secondary location. And that was very useful for us. We did not have to use that. We didn't have rising water as a big issue with this storm. It was mostly wind-driven rain and wind damage, as Phyllis talked about. But when it came time for us to talk about transferring all of these patients out, all of that data we had accumulated before the storm and having an idea about how we transport them within our facility made it very easy for us to then translate that to the teams that were helping us to place these critically ill patients in other facilities across the state, and then also to marry them with the transport models that we had available to us. For me, my team, I'm the leader of my team. And so, I stood up and I took the call for the weekend of the storm, knowing full well that I was going to be here for the storm and then thereafter to until relief could come in. I have excellent partners that were here, with me. So, even though this was my first storm as a physician and as a leader in the institution, I did have some backup from the medical perspective from my partners. But, I was here through all of it with Dr. Sutton as well from the hospitalist side. I don't know if you have anything to add
Yeah,
from that perspective too.
well, just from being, like Dr. Lorio was saying, being here in the storm, that's something as a leader of our teams and of our departments that we were expected to do. And obviously both of us wanted to do that. So I think some of the things where my role came in was we wanted to get as many patients that were well enough prior to the storm. So as far as planning, and Dr. Lorio was talking about the planning aspect of it, from my position, it was getting as many people out as I could prior to the storm that were well enough to go home. Like Phyllis said, we did have 120 patients that we did have during the storm that had to be transferred. So discharging those patients was a big deal. The other thing from my standpoint was planning and making sure that we have the staff here that we needed to be from the hospital medicine program. So as the hospitalist, we see the vast majority of patients in the hospital. So we also have a number of traditional practice providers in the community, which means they have clinic-based practices and come to the hospital and see those patients. So part of our planning was, what if this hurricane turns out to be what it actually was and people aren't able to get to the hospital? What do we do in those situations, and how do we function from that standpoint? Because at that time, we kind of take over the whole hospital. So with that, making sure I had my team A and team B in-house and reliable people in-house that we could count on, and our team C scheduled to come in as soon as possible was a big deal for us, and something that was definitely, had to happen, and made things transition pretty easy for us. We knew that team A and team B would be here, and we're waiting for team C to get here when they can. So that was some of my roles during the storm.
And just kind of, again, I'll open it up for questions. We got a lot of stories to tell. Depends which story you're interested in. As you saw the damage at the beginning of the video, and a lot of people want to know, how did that feel and what did it look like and what were we experiencing? I can kind of give you a little bit of an overview of the night of the storm. I can tell you when the storm started coming through, the wind was, as Dr. Lorio said in the video, it sounded like a freight train was coming through the organization. It was strong. It was 160, 180 mile an hour wind. They could say category 4. I assure you it was a 5. I assure you, from everything. You could feel the building, and we've got a pretty stable building, just kind of shake a bit. And then we ended up kind of getting some calls. The docs were available. They were with the patients. Everybody knew their role and what they needed to do. We very much pre-prepped that. And staff didn't get overly excited, but then you started seeing the windows start to fly in, and you started seeing the water coming in on the first floor. And all you had to do was say, all hands on deck. I would go through the ER, say, we need some help, guys. They would come. And whether it didn't matter the role you were in here at the organization, that evening, that night, everybody was the same. They got a towel, they started riding whatever machines we had to pick up water. And as we're sitting there going through that exercise and we're watching the water pouring in, because we've got windows, front windows, and all the seals were leaking because the wind was so strong, is then we got a call to say, you might want to come to the 5th floor. We go to the 5th floor, and the roof, we didn't know the roof was blowing off. And we have a big piece of the roof that we could show you. That's right there. We have a very thick concrete roof. It's a C-flat system. And underneath the flashing, we didn't know that was happening. The wind, I don't know if you can even get that, huh? The wind, see, look at our big chunk of roof that we keep. You saw in the video, the wind started coming underneath the flashing and just exploded our rooftop. Now, we just thought that maybe the drains were clogged, but the water just started pouring in. The 5th is our highest floor, from the 5th floor. And we had anything that you could think of trying to hold the water, pick up the water. And then we had windows that started flying out. And the reason why they were flying out is because those big chunks of concrete were flying off the roof and coming through the windows. We had patients in those beds. We had patients in the rooms. We were able to go ahead and see that. So we understood at that point. Our staff was still a little excited. Is that a fair way to say?
Yes.
A little bit apprehensive and a little bit excited, but as things get tougher, I get calmer. It's just my personality. And so we said, we're all right. We just move the patients to the halls. Then we'll move them down the corridors. I knew that the ICU patients were safe. They were on the first floor. We had all the hospitalists available with the other patients. And we just started moving people. Now we had to sleep all of our staff who were coming on to the next shift. So they were also in some of those rooms. So the ones that were off shift, like you all do for hurricane, everybody was helping. The glass issue would shut the door. At the beginning of the video, you probably didn't know what it was, but you saw it show one of the walls and you watched it pull away from the structure. Just kind of an overview of that. When we were on the 5th floor, we could feel the wind. The unit was empty, but you could feel the winds and the doors are flapping. We all have internal doors, fire doors to each unit, and they're flapping and we're not sure why. So we said another room must have blown out. We probably need to go check. We walked down that hallway and we couldn't find a room that the windows had blown out. So we couldn't figure out what it was. We went to the fire escape, and when you went to the fire escape, just like they tell you in case of a fire, you felt the rumbling so strong. We put our hands on the door and you could just feel the intensity. And I'm a curious personality, can't help myself. I said, well, we got to open the door. We just have to. My staff said, I don't think so. I said, well, sure we do. So when we opened the door, we could see that the roof had blown off and part of that wall was just being sucked in and out, and it was part of the side of our building. I said, well, that doesn't look so good. We might want to rethink that one. So we moved on our way. Now, we kept facilities in-house. We had people, we had docs, everybody. I just can't even tell you the value of having a real strong team and really skilled people and calmness throughout this entire event, because the first hour we were okay. The second hour we started to leak. By the third hour, the building said, nah, I'm not in it anymore. And by the 4th hour, we were mopping up water things. We had to move patients from the 5th floor down the hall, up some stairs, into a rehab unit that was out of that main corridor of towers that were just literally leaking everywhere. And again, like I said, when we had to transport all those patients, it didn't matter the role you played here in the hospital. Everybody came to help to move our patients. And then everybody was doing what they had to do to get through the storm, right? You want to say anything?
But a lot of it, nursing and staff really look to us as leaders, within our departments. And I think a lot of them feed off of the energy that, we exude. And so during the, height of the storm, it was just reminding staff and reminding patients, because, a lot of our patients that were awake, they know what hurricanes are. They've been through hurricanes. Some of them have lived through storms just as strong as this one. They knew what they were in. And so you had to just keep on reminding them that the building was here, the building was secure, even though we saw things otherwise when we opened up doors that curiosity is there. You have to continue to reassure a lot of the folks without lying, but to reassure that the building is doing what it's intended to do. There's some degree of crumple zone and engineered wiggle room into, what is around us, and, that there are fail safes. When the power kicked out and the generators kicked on, a lot of people started getting very nervous, running to critical care. And I was in the hallway between the 2 critical care units. And I was very calmly walking back to the critical care unit, and someone asked me, well, aren't you concerned about the ventilators? And I said, no, because we charged all of the batteries. We checked all of the batteries the day before. I know that each of our ventilators has at least 45 minutes to 1 hour before they're going to, run out of battery power. And I felt very confident in that. We had all the staff, trained to know and look at all of their ventilators as soon as that power cuts out and they switch over to battery power. We had talked about that in huddles in the morning. When power is lost, when this happens, this is what your eyes are going to do in every room. So, I was very comfortable walking between our 2 units, even as things were changing and developing.
I see the questions there, and Dr. Sutton, you might be able to help. It says, how did the staff feel in this? And I know you were on the floor talking to a lot of the staff too.
Yeah.
You want
So
to,
I see that. I think you're referring to the second question there. The staff. How were the staff impacted? How did you keep them engaged while dealing with their homes and their families? So kind of like Dr. Lorio was saying, they look to us for leadership, and they look to us and kind of feed off of our energy, certainly. And I feel like our preparation prior to the storm really allowed us to be pretty calm during everything. And we've got a plan in place and we know what to do. So I think that definitely helped, and that penetrated on down the line all to our staff. I think with those concerns were definitely there about families and about their homes. And when we lost, Wi-Fi, and we lost cell phones, and we couldn't really contact anybody, that certainly we had quite a few people that I hadn't talked to my mom in X amount of hours, and then she lives in this place, and I don't know if the house is still standing, but I've got neighbors that I know the house isn't standing. So I think that more so on the off time, when you were sleeping and kind of talking to the staff, is when people would kind of get those thoughts. But as soon as you're on your shift, we've got a job to do, and we're all in it together, and we're all doing the same thing. So it definitely kind of that camaraderie came out, and we're all just, hey man, we're praying for your family and everything. Keep us posted. And I think that definitely helped, just being busy and being in the moment and doing what we knew we had to do and what we were supposed to do.
That, and our staff is very much a family. We're a small hospital. We're the biggest hospital in our area, but we're still, comparatively, we're a smaller organization. We're not, a big monster multi-hospital organization. We know our staff. I know all of the unit nurses. I know most of the floor nurses. I know a lot of the respiratory staff, and I know who has children, who has family, who has elderly parents. And so that camaraderie between, the physicians and the staff, and administration and the staff, and, amongst the staff themselves, that really supported everybody through the brunt of the storm. And then even afterwards, you heard of staff members getting together and going to someone else's home to help pick up the debris, to go rip out the wet sheetrock, to help tarp roofs and different things. There's just that camaraderie in the hospital, amongst staff members and teams. And that really helped. And, in engaging folks, one of the things that I think we'll talk about in a little bit too, is how we stood up our services, focused on what we could stand up outside of the hospital itself. And we pulled all of our talents, and we're very creative in how we engage people to make sure that they could come back to work if they were able to. That also helped kind of support and cement that family approach of, we're going to take care of you, and, we're in this together type approach.
our goal was, again, we talk about the storm because a lot of people like to hear some of the dramatic part of the experience, which it was. But we were immediately after the storm, when Sunday hit. I have to tell you, when the first light came on, and that was, I guess, Monday morning, it's a little bit of a blur. At 4 a.m., we were able to go check the roof when the lights and daylight came. And we recognized that the roof was irreparable. It was no way. And several other things had shut down. We were on generator power. We didn't have water. We couldn't cool. We had no communication. We didn't have any IT. We didn't have our satellite phones. Did not work. I could try and tell you that it was spotty at best, but we had COVID patients that we had to consider how to care for and talk to their loved ones. That Dr. Lorio and Sutton, the only way they would have got through is to be able to stand on the roof during the hurricane to use the satellite phone. It just didn't work. So we, in essence, had no communication, nothing. So here we were, very injured. Our community at large was devastated. When the lights came on and sunlight came out and the rain went away, we were astounded at what it looked like outside of the building. Our employees too. You couldn't have left here if you wanted to. Literally, you couldn't. There were so many trees and lines and electrical lines and things that were broken and busted. It pretty much obscured every single entryway on roads and streets. You couldn't get through. The staff and all of us had a difficult time because our hope was that a lot of people did leave for the hurricane because they made a mandatory evacuation. And so our staff, along with ourselves, are trying to reach somebody to make sure that our loved ones were okay, but that really didn't work so well. So as the daylight came, you know, I've been here a long time and we've been through a lot of hurricanes. One of the hardest things for me, I brought all our team together and our directors who were in-house in our facilities. And I said, okay, talk to me a little bit about what we look like. Now, Dr. Lorio mentioned that we're not a big system. We're a big hospital, but not part of a system. We're a 321 bed facility, 325 bed facility. We offer a multifaceted of services. We had 120 patients there in our hospital, and we had to look and say, we can't safely render care. We could not put out a fire because we had no water. We could not give any continuity of care. We determined at that point it was not a safe environment for our staff, for our patients, and we made the call to evacuate, totally evacuate. I have to say that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done because I just haven't done that, and I've been in this role 18 years, and that was hard, but it was the right thing to do. Everybody agreed to where we were headed, and I have to tell you, my team is awesome. They kicked in, and we said, we'll make the call. We said we need to evacuate. And those staff members that knew they had devastation outside this building, to Dr. Sutton's point, immediately kicked into the role of we got to get patients out. Now, when we made the call, people came in droves. And I think some of that wasn't shown in the video that was in the first part, right? And we had helicopters and Black Hawks and ambulances, and they had difficulty getting through. They were trying to land on our front lawn because our heliport was totally devastated in this particular issue. You got to clean up debris and branches and find a way. And they did, And our whole focus was to get our patients out safely. Now, in the meantime, we've got no water. It's 85 degrees. We have no way to cook. We have no way to feed anybody. We don't have bathroom facilities because there is no water. To get into the graphic details, you got staff, you got people here, we got NICU babies. We had mothers who just delivered. All of those people had to be transported. We got our team together, which again, you see our docs and our staff, and we were able to get with Acadian and the ambulance structure. And it took us a full 24 hours from the time we said we're evacuating to get the patients out of here, a full 24 hours. Now, by luck and Jesus himself, I'm not sure which one, is that I'm the CEO. My cohort, Diane, is the COO. And she happened to be out of town that weekend, was trying to get in, but couldn't. That was a blessing because we started doing lessons learned, you know, from this time, but catastrophic thing is you need somebody off site. Because we just had to reach one person to say you need to make calls for help for this, because we couldn't get any communication out. Now, Bernie Claymore, who helps us a lot, we were able to get one cell tower, or sometimes one carrier worked and none of the others worked. And if anybody could get their phone to work at all, that was pretty much the Jesus phone, and everybody ran to it to see who we could do to call. And so, you know, if you've not had to live through water, no communication, no internet, you don't realize how much you are isolated because everything has turned very, very digital in that environment. We had, we started raiding our freezers. We went into the freezer. It was 85 degrees anyway, so nobody minded. Go and get whatever was in the freezer to start pulling out. And our staff would make sandwiches, our dietary people, who, by the way, when you have a category 4 or 5 hurricane, none of our staff showed up in dietary housekeeping. So everybody got assigned that duty to help who was in the hospital. So our directors and leaders in those areas, of course, were here, but some of those employees, which we have a standard that you must come. Of course, in this situation, that really didn't uphold. And so people fixed sandwiches and things and laid it out, you know, whatever it is. We were offering 10 minutes in the freezer for $10. It was that hot. You know, you got to have a sense of humor too. You definitely do. But once we got our patients out, in essence, the hospital you can't use the word closed. For those of you who ever have to go through this, don't ever say your hospital's closed, because then you have to relicense it to open it. What you have to say is your hospital's offering limited service. And our limitations were pretty vast. So we didn't know that. It was still our commitment to offer ER services, because with the devastation we had in our community and no healthcare, I mean, no healthcare, nothing. Even the ambulances couldn't get to bring people anywhere. They just would pretty much leave them or say, we got to find you an alternative. We felt real strongly we had to open some ER services, even if it was in a tent setting. And our ER staff and ER doctors were fine with that. And our goal became get up something that would provide care to anybody who might come in with a chainsaw or an EMT or anything that they could render some kind of care. And then we got a field hospital to open up in the parking lot. And then we started planning, how do we open the next service? Mm-hmm. And our issue became quit worrying about the building and worry about the service. And whatever we can open outside of this building, we will. And because you know what, a lot of times we as administrators worry about the hospital and how to give inpatient care because it's a fundamental thing of what we do. My issue is I said, we're going to go through the back door and open up everything besides inpatient care because we didn't have inpatient beds. And we'll do it in a parking lot. We'll do it out of a van. We'll do it wherever we can do it. We're going to do it. And so my docs were great on that. They were great on being a part of that. So week one, we opened ER services.
Yeah, so we evacuated the last patient at noon on Tuesday, and Friday AM at, I think it was 8 o'clock, we
7
opened
a.m.
7 a.m. ER services. So within a matter of 3 days, 2.5 days really, we had ER services up and running, and the first patient was waiting for them to open up shop for the day that morning. We had not advertised at all, but people come to the hospital building knowing that this is their safe haven, that this is where they're going to get care. And I mean, they were here before we even advertised that our ER was open. They were here.
Yeah, I'm looking at the question. It says, was your hospital built to withstand a certain hurricane level? Well, our roof could withstand about 90 to 120 mile-an-hour winds because you didn't expect that back when it was built. We are rebuilding that roof right now, and we're going to withstand about 200 mile-an-hour winds. I don't know that any of us want to be here during that, but our roof won't blow off. Something else might. The sides, but the roof is going to stay. So anyway, but if we would have waited for the roof to be rebuilt to open up our services, the north side of our building got slammed. The south side was a little bit better. We're using our south side inpatient rooms and got creative and some other ways to house patients so that we would have a bed capacity of about 100, 140 beds. And we've opened those, but that again includes skilled rehab and ICU, all of that. Women's services, labor and delivery. So we've been able to open up a lot of that. And we did open up, all of our services. I can kind of go through that timeline if you'd like, and then I'm gonna turn it over to my docs, is that we felt we call ground zero the week of the hurricane because we had to evacuate people. We had no generator. We had no water. We had water trucks who had to come in here. We were working with the state. The governor was great about calling to say, I can't have a tier 1 hospital. That's the only healthcare in the area be down. What can we do to help? We all recognize those have a little bit more red tape to get through. We ended up having, like I said, we immediately got with Verizon. All that network was down. We were hoping that they could get us, and we got our ER up, and that was all that 4 days within the time of the storm. The next week we decided, okay, we need our doc clinics up. To the best of our ability, we've got to get our doctor clinics up because people need a place to see our physicians, but they can't be admitted. And so Dr. Lorio took that lead along with Dr. Sutton, and we ended up trying to get our doctor clinics up to the best of our ability, but they were damaged a lot. So we needed generators. But you realize real quickly, you can't bring up a doctor office if you don't have lab or radiology or something to do testing on a patient. We didn't have that. We became very creative on that too, very creative. And we found any closet or hole that wasn't damaged, and whether we had an x-ray machine or a way to run lab, we did, you know, and we used couriers. And our role was to try and get as many people back to work, doing some of these duties and cleaning up as fast so they weren't without a paycheck. When you get hit that hard, people don't have, they need their job, and they need to have that mental knowledge that you are coming back, because with the devastation, people felt like, I won't have a job for 6 months. We still have organizations in our area that won't be up for 1.5 years, that won't be up for 7 months. And my commitment of 30 days only became, we guaranteed their pay for the pay period we were in, which was 2 weeks, no matter what, whether you were here or not here, we paid you. I said, we're going to make you take that off the table. Then we went back and looked if they had PTO or paid time off. You know, you get to keep it for 1 year, and if you don't use it, it falls off. We reinstated anything that was going to fall off for the last year. So they would have some of those extra hours for vacation that they could use for the next 2 weeks. Then I went to my team and said, okay, guys, people are paid for 30 days. That means we need to be up in 30 days. If we're here working, we need to get them back to work. And that was our driver. That was pretty much our driver of, no matter what, I will get this family or our employees back in a 30-day span. And whether we had to do it in a parking lot or a bus, we were going to do it. We were going to do it. And I have to tell you, these guys right here helped us through all of that, Yeah, I'll let y'all kind of.
Yeah, so we were very creative with getting the clinics back up and running. We had to rehouse several of our clinics within our building itself because of different damage to different office spaces and things, due to mostly the atrium building, which is our biggest clinic space, had a lot of wind-driven rain. And so we had to rehome a few folks, and we were able to do that by sharing space a little bit and getting creative with scheduling. So we were able to bring back pretty much all of our clinic staff, everything from access specialists at the front desk to billing and coding, and our nurses and MAs. And then, you know, we quickly realized we had a backlog, because at that point when we were opening up clinics, we had about a 2-week span of all of our clinics, which was well over, I think it was like 2,000, almost 3,000 patients that had to be rescheduled for our missed visits, not even including all of the things that were going to come up with exacerbations or new illnesses because of the storm or COVID exposure concerns and everything that we normally were seeing pre-storm. So we got very creative, and one of the things that Phyllis had asked us to look at was, how can we utilize our staff outside of their normal roles? And so from a clinic standpoint, we pulled a lot of our clinical staff, as well as our access specialists that work over on the acute side, over into our clinics to help us with that overflow, to help with rooming patients, to help with checking people into clinics. We also expanded our clinic services. We opened some remote services, which the hospitalist team was amazing to help us staff from a physician standpoint. But we utilized a lot of our hospital nurses and cross-trained them to the clinics to be able to bring them to help us with testing at the clinic sites for COVID testing, administering vaccines, and then also helping to room the patients. And one of the questions that I saw up there was about what community resources did we find to be most beneficial. You know, in terms of our community, we're one of the biggest drivers to the economy. You know, the oil industry is one, the school industry and business, and then us. And so we're one of probably the biggest driving forces in our community in terms of resources. And so we became that community resource for a lot of our patients through these expanded clinic services. We were partnering with different organizations to bring food and supplies down to the more devastated areas further down the bayou from where we are. And, we used some of those resources and contacts also to help our employees that were in need as well. So we were able to, within our team that was leading through the storm and then our recovery efforts after the storm, we're able to look at everything that was coming in and in a very organized approach, be able to redistribute everything that we had coming in.
I'll let Dr. Sutton kind of talk about, this was devastating, no doubt. And we had it planned out for week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. We mapped out our 30 days and we said, what could we bring up every week? But I have to tell you, as we met a lot all the time, is you'd bring the team together and we would meet 2 and 3 times a day. You had to have an opening meeting, then you had to go see if it was feasible, and then we would have a closing meeting to say, okay, because it was the only way you could communicate. We didn't have levels of communication, as I mentioned. But it gave you the chance, through adversity comes opportunity. It gave you the chance to have a clean slate. There really wasn't any limiter. Of course, the environment, and there wasn't gas, and there wasn't food, and there wasn't grocery stores, and there wasn't a whole lot of stuff. We got gas we got a tanker truck to come in that we would give to our employees so that they could have gas to make it to work. But then we said, you know what, we can't get patients here. They're living in a tent. They don't have resources. They don't have gas money. They don't have food. They don't in these smaller outreach areas. So we got into a van, and I got to give Dr. Sutton and them credit. Our hospitalists weren't busy at that moment, right?
Yeah.
We left all our patients and we were doing outpatient services, and they were very keen on saying, hey, we got some great ideas. And they got into a caravan and off they went down to these low-lying areas, lower lying or harder impacted areas, and were the man in the van.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to bring up also. Like Phyllis and Dr. Lorio said, we realized pretty quickly that we did need to open our services back here as quickly as possible. And people came pretty much immediately. But we also realized that a lot of people couldn't, and that we needed to go to reach out to them with medical care, of course, because that's what we do, but also to partner with others and to bring food and to bring supplies. And we would organize, the whole team would organize these mobile clinics. So we've got cancer screening vans. It's an early detection van, so with Mary Bird Perkins. So we turned these vans completely into just a general medicine van. So we would go and we would see people in the community, and a lot of things were, hey, I evacuated, I forgot my medicine, I came back and I don't have a house. So all my medicine is gone and we just need refills. And the amount of stories that we heard just repetitively were heartbreaking, and just so many unique stories, but all of them with a very similar tune to them. So we saw a ton of people through those vans, and we also gave them, supplies and food, and just the appreciation from these people was just amazing. They were just so appreciative of Terrebonne General reaching out to them. We've most of them have been coming here for forever, and to see us come to them and their community in a time of need, I think really meant a lot. And it certainly meant a lot for us to be able to do it. The other thing, like Phyllis alluded to, we weren't too busy at the time. We were hospitalists and we evacuated all our patients. That's not something that we're used to. So my team is used to being constantly busy. We're a very busy hospital. So we were just really looking forward to being able to provide those services and to go. And like Dr. Lorio said, to be able to pull people that may not have had work for a little while, to bring them to those mobile clinics. And maybe we weren't doing the normal things that we would do in between patients. I was handing out dog food, doing all kinds of stuff, helping cook chicken, whatever we needed to do. And it was just, I think, a great thing to bring the community together.
What we realized pretty quickly is if you're ever in that situation, our intentions were great. And we said, okay, the roads aren't clear, down power lines, things like that. And they were trying to clear those. We stuck our physicians, which were great. They were troopers, in a mobile bus and said, head to those low-lying areas that they can't get care, that may need care, and they can't make it to the the clinics because they weren't all open. We couldn't reach a lot of our physicians. To be quite candid, again, you had minimal ability to communicate. So if you think you're going to go into a community and park a van, how do they know you're there? You know, we didn't have a way because these people today still may not have internet and may not have electricity or phones, right? Towers are minimized. It was really in a more remote area. And I don't mean remote that it was isolated. It's just they get to the larger, more populated areas first. So how do you do that? Well, people were coming in droves from outside of our community and other states and everywhere and wanted to cook and wanted to do things and wanted to help our hospital and just the community at large because the devastation was just so heavy. And they kept asking us, can we do for our staff? And, you know, we were feeding our staff. Granted, it wasn't necessarily hot meals, but our staff was great. And so we said we would bring people in as we would open a service, right? And so they were anxious to get back. They had their houses and their families to tend to. They wanted to be back at work. So if anybody wanted to cook, we told them where our van was going that day. And could you kind of be the front guy to our medical van? And if you tell people in a community there's food at the local X, the cars lined up in droves. And then we could say, do you need medical care? Come on in. Do you need medical care? And you know what? The word got out about the food, which then again, we pretty much piggybacked to know about the clinic. And then we'd educate them to say, we'll be here next Tuesday or we'll be here on Thursday. And so it became, that was the way that we were able to communicate till we could do better communication, absolutely better communication. So it allowed you to get inventive. You got to, again, have people that are willing to go through those exercises with you. And we did. We absolutely did. It made it for a lot of satisfying moments. Well, then we started realizing our cancer patients were going to have to find care somewhere else. So we had to get cancer up and running as fast as we could because they needed, whether it was their infusions, their shots, their treatments. And we did it on a ramp if we had to. We gave testosterone injections. We gave some of our cancer injections, just like we did with COVID. Say you can wait right there. Our docs will be right here. They'll stand in the parking lot, but we'll give you whatever we need to do. And then we were able to remediate our cancer area, and we were able to get them inside as one of our first services that we were able to provide. And that was just actually on, I forget, we brought up the clinics. That was on week 2. We were already doing our cancer services. And then we said, well, you know what? Babies are coming. Our OBs had gotten on staff at another place, but then people were having to drive a considerable way to deliver their babies. So we said, how do we get that up? That wasn't a parking lot issue. We felt they needed to be inside. So we did have that area remediated as one of the first areas to try and bring that up. But again, it was very isolated. We appealed to that population. We said it'll be our first population. We had to be able to provide food service, get electricity up good enough to be able to feed the patients. But we limited our stays, and then we still couldn't have inpatient. So then we started the next week doing outpatient surgeries. We said we'll get those people taken care of as long as they're less than a 24-hour stay. And we were able to get people back and provide that service. And then we still were building and remediating and doing everything all this time. And then we said we'd wait about a week, and then we did inpatient. So it was a very aggressive journey, but it worked. It worked for us on that. So what can we answer for you? Because I want to give some time for that. What would you do differently to prepare to respond to post-hurricane the next time around? We have a lessons learned list that we determined in our executive meetings on what we learned. And then I brought it to my directors, actually, interestingly enough, this week to ask what are the things that they felt they saw. One of the first things that we would do that we realized real quickly is number one is always have somebody off site to be your point person in case you do go down so much that you have no communication or no method to communicate. So you just got to find one location and they can help speak for you and make those contacts for you. 2, get a flush truck.
Yes.
You have no idea the detriment that causes when you have a lot of people in your organization, and I don't mean we were closed, but whether you're trying to get back up running or you've got people here, we would provide a sandwich and a red bag. And that pretty
All
much,
human excrement had to be red bagged out once we lost water power. So that was probably the biggest demoralizer, I think, amongst the staff was, how do I empty myself?
you can't
know-
take a shower. It's 85 degrees. You have no way to take care of any bodily functions. And then you can't necessarily bring it to the garbage can, there was a certain area, and you did that for 5 days. 5 days we were in here without having water, electricity, on generator power, or anything cool. That was quite a challenge. And as much as your staff say, well, I'd rather be at home, unfortunately, they didn't have a home. So many people had to stay here, and whether we made accommodations for people on the floor with a mattress, I have to tell you, that part was miserable. $10 for 10 minutes in the freezer, of course, it was a joke, but people took you up on it. You would have paid $150 for 5 minutes in the freezer. It got to be where money and time had no value when you're in, it's a war zone. It was truly a war zone. And so we determined that there are many things that we would look at. We would put in place, people were very gracious to reach out to us and say, can our staff work at your facility, but lease them through us so that, there's no, you pay them or we'll pay them and they work over there, you reimburse us so they can continue to get their benefits and all of their, still accruing their vacation and their time. You don't break that employment area. And we were able to establish those. Now we got up so fast, we didn't have to utilize them, but actually we were able to utilize some of our staff to help them in a coding method or something from a distance and vice versa. So we kind of found another opportunity to utilize people in a different way that the hurricane created that we would not have done before, very much so. I'm trying to think of some of the others because we had a very long list of things that we didn't think of. Oh, phones. I can't tell you a magic thing to use, but we did talk to our IT who's in here. Satellite isn't the answer. I don't know what is, or they got to be a different satellite phone. Find a way to make sure that you, and get some kind of contract with your carrier, your phone carrier, that you got a cell tower parked near your facility for that particular situation for after, because them coming in and trying to get through the traffic and stuff, you're pretty much not able to do it. Find some kind of internet capability outside of what you have. That was a major issue for us, trying to get up, and our doctor's offices couldn't get up. Generators, you couldn't get up. Diesel gas, everybody stores that. We store it. We would get a tanker truck moving forward to have on standby because we had if you got no electricity, gas stations cannot open. They have no way of pumping the gas. So you can't run your generators, you can't run your diesel. Now hospitals can, but your staff employees cannot. You better have cash when people tell you that. No ATM works. Checks are no good. Truly, your bartering system is about food and supplies because nothing else had a relevance in that kind of model at all. What other questions? How did the Red Cross coordinate? The Red Cross was not available at all. They did not. They were not an entity that was here for us. We did use the state quite a bit, GOSEP and the governor's office, and they were available. But we called LHA, and they had a contact person that you would call, or GOSEP, and they would help in our emergency preparedness, our local emergency preparedness group. We're so large, we're a city by ourselves. They were worried about everything's broken in a community, everything. And the hospital was important to get up, but they had to clear roads and find a pharmacy to open, or we had nowhere to send people for anything. And so your local government is tied up with that, and you just want water. And that is a very hard commodity to get if all the pipes under the ground are broken. We have 2 feeds to our hospital, and both feeds were totally decimated. We had no way to get water to this hospital. Now, if you ask the water, we ended up meeting with them quite a bit with your parish leaders, and their meters show that we needed 80 pounds of pressure to push it through our chiller system. And if you ask them, they were at 80 pounds. When it got to Terrebonne General, it was less than 5. That meant there were that many breaks in the line between the water service utility and us. And they have to go through and start turning off the water that houses were just getting until they found the break in the line. And it would be segregated to just come to the hospital, which again, your public doesn't love that, but we had to have a way of cooling things. We couldn't open. Everybody wants you to open, and we truly could not open without water. So one of the things we will be working on is trying to get a water tower for our organization on our campus in case of some kind of detrimental thing like this, that you're not dependent on a week or 2 weeks to just get water access to your organization. Because without water, I have to tell you, fundamentally, we'll shut you down. We'll shut you down. Any other questions related to that? Mark, any other pieces or parts or things that you want us to address?
There was a question way back in the beginning about, dealing with this in the middle of COVID. And, was this just one more thing to deal with, or was it a little bit of a relief for everybody to focus on something different?
No.
So one of the thoughts, and I don't know if it's just the morbid humor that we in healthcare sometimes have, is this whole event, when the hurricane hit, we were very much steeped in another kind of spike of COVID, that this whole event became, kind of nicknamed the Pandurricane. Just the middle of a pandemic, we had, I think it was 17 COVID ICU patients plus a floor full of COVID positive patients, on the telemetry unit. And now we have the hospital that was shaking around us during the storm, which, we had hurricane force winds. They weren't as strong as the hurricane force, but we had hurricane force winds for the better part of 24 hours, really. The hurricane 4 to 5 force winds were with us for 4 to 6 hours. And then, it started tapering off, but they were still pretty dang strong winds. And so the morbid humor kind of came out a little bit, but the difference between the pandemic, we had developed within our organization a very organized and kind of almost team approach to how we manage COVID patients here in the hospital, that by the time the storm came, we knew our plan for the COVID patients. While we do focus and identify unique things with each patient's care, we had a very much a protocol to make sure that there was some standardization that was evidence-based, that we made sure that we were providing the best care that we had for our COVID patients. Our nurses, I reviewed, and I know unit supervisors reviewed with nurses on the regular, the protocols that we used for going in and out of COVID rooms to make sure that staff were safe going in and out of rooms, making sure that we're using appropriate PPE, that we're doing everything that we're supposed to do every day. So while we had a high number of COVID patients, at the point that the hurricane hit, I don't want to say that it had become our normal. I hate the new normal, the not so new normal lingo that kind of is out there now. But we've made a plan to kind of attack, and we had COVID, I don't want to say under control, what's the word I'm looking for, but we managed within our system. And so the hurricane just became another kind of obstacle in our course of the past 18 months that we had to deal with. It was a lot. It was a lot more tangible. It was something that we could see, and there were very specific hurdles that we had to meet to get different parts of our services open. And so it was just a different type of, I guess, obstacle that we had. And it was, I mean, almost a welcome relief, I think, a little bit from all of the things that we had done over the course of the 18 months with COVID. It was just a whole different set of challenges, I think, for us as an organization.
Yeah, and I think, like Dr. Lorio was saying, it was definitely a different set of challenges, but we focus so much on our patients. Obviously, that's what we do on a regular basis. We put 100% of our energy into our patients all the time. So I do think, it was kind of a strange feeling when every patient was evacuated. And then it really forced us to just kind of turn to each other and kind of focus on each other and say, how are you? How did your house, hold up? How is your family? What can I do for you? I think it did kind of get us to reevaluate a lot of different things, but to really kind of focus on each other and focus on us as an organization and focus on our future too.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to speak for them because I tend to, right? Is I think they're being humble in a lot of ways because COVID was rough. We've been having it here in our organization, like many people throughout the state, for a good 18 months. We've been full with it. We spiked. Terrebonne Parish was one of the parishes that had the lowest vaccination rate. So our COVID was heavy and the acuity was high. And the patients that were in this organization at the time of a hurricane was concerning. The acuity was bad. Where Dr. Sutton and Dr. Lorio said they wouldn't go anywhere else because they've been caring for these patients. But the reality of the situation is we lost patients in the transfers. We did. They were critical. They were hard to put on an ambulance or a helicopter. And I know they were emotional about it. And they tried to call the families and reach out to them to say, we're going to have to evacuate. And I don't know if your loved one's going to make it. And, those are hard calls to make. I'll let them go through it. And that's where Dr. Sutton said, I couldn't go home if I wanted to. I couldn't. I got to stay with my patient. I got to put them on the van. I got to put them on the ambulance. Dr. Lorio, the same. I got to know they're in a safe place. I don't know if they'll make the trip. I'm speaking from. So, I mean, we're not cavalier by any means, but we've been through hell. We've been through 18 months of hell, and then you had a hurricane. We got to figure out how to survive in that. So you learn a little humor and you learn how to desensitize or decompress. But the reality is this group that I looked at, all of us, I'll include myself, is that you went on sheer adrenaline. You went from COVID to going through this, for us staying awake and not leaving the place for the good 30 days. I know I personally didn't sleep, did nothing, because you are on a fast train to say, I got to make this happen. Now we're finally at the point where we can start taking care of our own families, our own homes. So you start to decompress by having a little humor and say, I don't even remember that. I don't even remember what happened then, but we had to chart it out. But I'll let them talk about it if they feel comfortable. They were extraordinarily emotional moving those patients that they've cared for a long time. We probably have 40 to 60 COVID patients in that realm. I don't know the number, but it was a lot. And they were very, very acute.
So not only do we help to take care of the COVID patients in our community, but we had actually reached out to some of those smaller feeder hospitals that typically do transfer their higher acuity patients to us on a regular basis. Myself and my team had reached out to several of the smaller hospitals, and we were available to run cases by to some of the physicians that are taking care of them. A lot of them are family practice docs who have done zero critical care in their training. We're taking care of sick COVID patients, in a 4 ICU bed hospital whose acuity is for ICU is typically, what we would look at as more like a telemetry type patient. And they were taking care of extremely sick COVID patients, and they didn't know where to go next with their ventilator. And unfortunately, we were unable to take transfers at that time because of how full we were with high acuity COVID patients. And so I had started caring for several of the patients that we had in our facility at the time that we were evacuating patients, even before they reached our doors. So I knew the patient's history. I knew all about their COVID course at the external facility before we were able to bring them here. And then we had them here for the better part of a week to 2 weeks. And then the hurricane hit and we had to transfer them out. And two of them in particular really were very emotional for me because I knew going into the transport mode that they already had a mortality of over 80%. And these are babies. These were kids that were, in their 20s and 30s. So I knew just the sheer act of transporting them from our facility to the facility 4 hours away was going to be devastating for them. And we could barely reach their families to let them know that, one, they were doing so poorly over the course of the 24 hours through the storm, but now, two, we have to send them further away from their family, which was just awful. I was part of the team that was helping to organize some of the transport. And I'll tell you, finding matching hospitals that can take care of the acuity that we had, when I would talk with their staff about, this is what we have this patient on, these are the therapies, these are the ventilator modes and settings that they're on. Some of the hospitals said, no, we can't do that. And so we had to find another place for that patient to go. So, that it just became an extra level of, I guess, organization for us to marry what the patient's need were to the facility that they were going to, because a lot of times what generates on the reports in terms of acuity, whether that's drips or oxygen requirements, that doesn't translate to what the receiving hospital is going to see when they get that patient unpackaged from transport. And so sometimes when we would kind of have those conversations was, well, can you take this acuity? Do you really understand what this patient needs? And when we would explain what the patient was on, they were, no, we can't do that. So that, made me nervous a little bit sometimes sending some of these patients out, because I wasn't sure that they were going to get the same, level of care that they were getting here. Another layer to that is our patients, specifically at our facility, generationally, they are very faithful to this organization. I have several patients, I've been here 5 years, but I have several patients that'll tell me, I will go nowhere else but Terrebonne General. I have several patients who called my clinic day 2 after the storm, calling and saying that they had a COPD exacerbation, and there was no way in hell they were going to New Orleans. There was no way in hell they were crossing Highway 90 to go to another hospital. They were going to wait till Terrebonne General opened, or they were going to die at home, what was left of their home. So I had to figure out how to care for them in an outpatient setting without having a clinic, without having a pharmacy nearby to take care of these patients. So on top of just knowing that about our community and how much our community depends on our hospital, sending out those patients was very emotional, because you don't know the physicians that are going to receive them, the nurses that are going to receive them are not going to have that community tie to that patient. They're not going to maybe fight as hard. And that's, even though I know medically, I'm sure that they took the best care that they could of the patients, there's always that nagging thought in the back of your head. So, that was part of it. And then, like Dr. Sutton alluded to, after the last patient was gone, as a hospital-based physician, I didn't know what to do with myself, because I'm so used to waking up in the morning, opening my phone, looking at my census, looking at my patient list for the day, seeing where my day is going to be, what it's going to go, looking at those critical lab values that came in for the few hours that I slept. That's my normal morning. I woke up that next day and there's nothing on my list. There's no one. So I showed back up at the hospital and I asked Phyllis, so what can I do next? Because I need something to do. I can't sit and just wait So I showed up at every meeting and didn't leave.
Nathan had his group.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think like Dr. Lorio was saying, we always get attached to our patients, and that's been something that has been going on since I've been a physician. But I think COVID has kind of amplified that a little bit because of how long the patients are here and how critical they are. But it also forms those relationships with the families that we would have previously before COVID. But again, you're talking to these families every single day, like we always do, but you're doing it for a month, or you're doing it for 3 weeks, or you're doing it for 5 weeks, every single day. So you know them, you know their name. I know how their mom's doing. I know how they're doing. I know everything about them. I know everything that's going on. So one of the biggest challenges, like we were talking about, and not to keep harping on this, but the communication issue was a huge challenge for me. There's one case in particular that I've thought about every single day since the storm hit. Every single day, I wake up at night thinking about it sometimes. But just being so close to this family and being so close to this patient, and I had never spoken a word to the patient that he heard, because he's been intubated. We received him as a transfer, so I'd been intubated the whole time. But I felt so attached to that patient and to the family members, and this is one of the ones that we really struggled to get in contact with. Because where they were, they didn't have cell service. We had satellite phone issues. So I was literally on the roof after the hurricane, in the rain, in the wind, on the satellite phone, to be able to try to get some type of information to her. And none of it was good information. It was all bad news that I was telling her, but I couldn't just kind of let that go. Obviously, we had been formed a relationship since then. So we were finally, after quite some time, able to get a signal through to where I could briefly talk, but connection was poor, given bad information, or not bad information, but bad news to the patient. So that was just something that kind of stands out to me.
And the patient did not make the transfer.
The patient, and the patient didn't make it.
Those are some of the real stories. The other part of that is we had NICU babies, and when we had to make the call to close, we couldn't get in contact. Remember, when you do say that I am evacuating, the control you have is zero. Your job is to get them on an ambulance or a methodology of transfer. But you work with the state or GOSEF, and they help you find placement for these patients. You will need, one of the other lessons learned, we needed our docs. Because when we went to put them on, whether it was a helicopter or an ambulance or an ambulance, they needed to know diagnosis, weight, height, all kind of information that we didn't anticipate. But if you're flying them out, you got to have all that. And if your computer system's down, thank God my team here knew a lot of our patients, and they were their patients. But if your docs aren't in-house like they happen to be with us, then you don't have access to that information, because we couldn't. Now, we had NICU babies here, and we had to make the call to go ahead and transfer. Try and get in touch with the mothers and the families who have these NICU babies to say we are moving them to Lafayette or Baton Rouge. We couldn't get in touch with some of those families. That's what kept me awake at night, is how do you tell a family member who's looking for their baby, I'm sorry, we transferred them. And they went in a group. At least all the babies got to go to one place. And I think it was Lafayette, and we're very grateful for that. But some families we never could get in touch with prior to them getting on a helicopter to be transferred. And these are little bitty preemies. Then you had the other extreme of somebody who was notified and said, I have family in Baton Rouge, can you send them there? And we had a long discussion to say, we don't get that option. They bring the ambulance or the helicopter, and they are sent to where the state says there's accessibility and availability. So families wanted to start partitioning out their loved one to not go. We tried not to leave the state very much, but now you had people that had to go all the way to Mississippi. We did end up having to go to Singing River. And again, I'm grateful to all these facilities because our acuity was very high, but now people had to drive there. And like I said, it is an event. And I know we started out being a little lighthearted because it's the only way you could survive, but you could see the emotion and the commitment. And one of the things we told our team, because that burden gets heavy for your staff, yourself, and everybody be a leader. And I told them, we're not a victim. The hurricane happened to us. It's not who we are. It's not what we stand for. We're not a victim. We don't need a pity party. We just need our party, and we will build and we will move and we will put our energy in that, and we will be up in 30 days, come hell or high water. But we didn't ask for high water.
No,
That
no,
didn't
please.
come. We had hell, but we didn't have the high water. So, and our team responded wonderfully to that and to that challenge. And so I'm proud of everything that we were able to do. But again, if you ask me how to repeat it, I couldn't tell you. I could tell you that you got to have good people around you and that understand and are committed to the vision that you have and the commitment to our community and our patients and our staff. You saw the emotion in my docs, but I got the same from my employees, and they wanted to come back to work. They needed to come back to work, and they understood and felt our commitment to get them back as quickly as possible. So we're good. And now we're starting to figure out now how to take care of plan B, which is to rebuild our community and our homes and all the other parts of the challenges that we have. But for the hospital, we're doing okay. We're doing really, really good. People are back at work. It's great in the halls. It's nice to see faces. Our patients are back. They are comfortable. The nursing homes and people couldn't come back to the community till healthcare was established. We got all that settled. Now our people are trying to take care of themselves a little bit, and we're helping with that too. Through this kind of thing, you've got some funds. We got a lot of employees, like 120 who were displaced, who have no homes, who have no resources, that we donated internally funds that they could go apply for. Other places have been so gracious to make that offer too. And we're just trying to support those that are taking care of other people. So if there's any other questions, we'll be glad to address them.
Any final questions?
Any final comments, Dr. Sutton, Dr. Lorio?
Think that I covered most of what I wanted to.
I think a lot of the strength in our organization, it comes from the top and goes all the way down to the bottom. There was a very strong organization before the storm. Our leaders, from Phyllis to all of her staff, they were all here through the storm. The physicians were here throughout the storm, and not just hiding in a hole in administration. I mean, they were very visible, walking through the halls, making sure things were continuing to operate, making sure that we were addressing issues as they arose. And throughout all of it, I think one of the things that's very important to our organization is we took notes. We took a ton of pictures during the event, immediately after the event, as we found things. And then we wrote down everything, because to keep a log and to keep kind of the span of where you started to where you're going in each step of the way. And that's kind of how the video came about that we showed at the beginning. That's helped us tremendously, staying on task, making sure that everybody's working through like our designated teams to make sure that as we stand up each service, we kind of go from one step to the next very logically and smoothly, that we don't have to. I don't think one step of the process we had to scale back from where we started. When we said that we were opening a service and we opened that service, we were able to open it in a meaningful and impactful way. Our hospital is normally 340 beds. Right now we have 140, 150 beds. So we're open. We're not at the capacity that we enjoyed before the hospital, but we're open. We're offering all of our services back to our community. Our cath lab is open. We're doing open heart surgeries again. We're doing cancer diagnosis and staging procedures. We're getting patients in for, much needed, surgeries, both elective and urgent as they come in through the ER. We're able to handle medically everything that we did before the storm. Now it's a matter of getting our bed capacity back to where it was. And, that's going to come in time as we kind of iron out the last bits of this puzzle. But, it's been a very educational experience for me, learning a lot more about how hospitals run, how to manage, and also just the disaster medicine. And if, there's physician leaders on your team, there's actually a lot of CME events about disaster medicine that are available out there. And I'm looking at, one of the things that I'm going to take out of this is I'm looking into some of those CME events, because it's something that, will be helpful to kind of cement and compare what are some of the lessons learned that other people have had as well, and how we fared through the event and how to medically manage the patient through those types of events.
Well, I think this presentation has been very impactful, to use one of those words, and I think really amazing the stories that you guys have told and shared. Thank you so much. I know you've been probably thanked a lot, but thank you for sharing, and thank you for all that you've done for your community. And thank you to all the participants and people that have donated towards the Louisiana Care Funds. We'll have a total and post that online probably later this week. So everybody take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank
y'all.
you.